Yeah, thanks for checking. Yeah, thanks for checking. Hey, good evening, everyone. As everyone's joining on, Gabby did let me know that she was going to be 45 minutes late to the meeting, and so since she's actually applying for reelection, if reappointment, if someone else could chair the meeting, that would be great. I think Scott by default is our vice chair. This is a pretty simple meeting to run tonight.
Is Scott on yet?
I think Scott just joined.
Oh, there he is. Okay.
Scott, if you can hear me, I was just saying that Gabby's going to be 45 minutes late. She obviously usually runs our meeting as meetings as chair. Since she is running for reappointment right now due to term expiration, and she will not be here, someone else could run the meeting. That'd be great. I'll default to you to give you that first choice. It's a pretty simple meeting to run. We don't have any action items, just updates.
Sounds good. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I guess it's just a call to order and attendance.
Correct.
So it, don't see what time it is here, but it's probably 6:03. City of Leadville Planning and Zoning Commission, a regular meeting on 5/22/24. I'd like to start the meeting with roll call.
Mayor Green.
Here.
Commissioner Bauer.
Here.
Commissioner Ducharme.
Here.
Law.
Here.
Commissioner Tanous.
Here.
Commissioner Lave.
Here.
And alternate Commissioner Lauritsen did let me know she's not feeling well. She will not be in attendance. Oh, sorry, Scott, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Moving on to the next approval of the agenda, and if there are any revisions.
No revisions from staff.
Any from the commission? Hearing none. Moving on. Are there any, it looks like there's no approval of the minutes at this point in time?
Correct. I'll get to that in a minute, but we will have minutes going forward. But this probably be the last one tonight that we will not have minutes, but we will have minutes going forward.
I'm sorry to hear that. All right then, general updates.
Let's go back to public comment.
Okay, sorry about that. Yep. Public comments?
And we do have one member of the public in person here in my office. Steve, you have anything you'd like to speak? Okay, no comments in person.
Okay. Moving on to general updates.
All right, so I just have great news. I'm thrilled to say that Alex Willis, the planning department's newest team member, started as a planner 1 on Tuesday, and he will be working part-time 3 days a week for the planning department over the next few months and going full-time, transitioning to full-time in the fall. Alex is a Leadville local and has a degree in architecture from the University of New Mexico, has been practicing architecture locally and with his own business, and he is transitioning out some of his clients, also his athletes that he trains, and will be going full time in the fall. So thrilled to have him onboarded, and there's a lot to do, and he's kind of jumping right in. So very happy to make that announcement.
I'm really happy to hear that. That's great.
Alex will be, in terms of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I'm still going to be your staff member, in the evenings. The intent is really for Alex to work 8 to 5, and I'll continue to cover the evening meetings, so City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission. Alex will be playing a supportive role, so he will be typing up the minutes And occasionally, he may have projects that will be on your agenda that I will be presenting, that he may have written a staff report, especially if we have multiple projects that we're both working on for one meeting. And he will be playing a more of a supportive role for the Historic Preservation Commission meeting, since they meet kind of during business hours, starting before 5 p.m. But yeah, that's my update. Thank you.
I would like to comment, Alex is, he is a Leadville local and really a terrific young man, so very pleased.
Great.
Yeah, that's
I'll move
great
on.
news.
Oh, go ahead. All right, I'll move on to P and Z appointments. So this is just the update that we have one vacant commissioner position and one vacant alternate position. And those, that application has been, or that vacancy has been posted will be posted in the Herald. I believe it's this week and next week. And for the city council meeting of the 4th. And after that, I think we will need to maybe consider a discussion about chair after that appointment is made, the chair position. But we don't have to get to that now.
All right,
Moving
then.
on, I will, in your packet, I have included the city council update that was in the city council packet for last night's meeting. And I can go through a few of the highlights. There's probably 8 or so key highlights that I can mention, and then just feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions on anything specific. So this is in the second page of your packet. One of our key active applications right now is it's actually multiple applications that will go through public hearings at P&Z and HPC, our 2 commissions, and then city council for boxcars at Freight. So these are active applications. Freight essentially has acquired 2 railroad boxcars, and they're intending to use those for a couple different types of uses, office use, etc., at the rail yard that we all know, and that technically requires a conditional use permit and a certificate of appropriateness. I think it's a relatively straightforward application. There's just a couple things to discuss that are interesting about this project, and then that will ultimately arrive at both of those applications will arrive at city council. I do have the building permit application for the 12 apartments on the Laurel parcel that is being project managed by Chafee Housing Trust. And so I'm expecting there were some comments that they were working on. They just resubmitted my comments from last fall. And so I'm working to review that resubmittal this week, and hopefully they can be proceeding to their building permit to start construction on that modular project just very soon. On the rail yard, the latest on this is that work is happening to address our concerns and comments that our engineers have identified, but work remains. And the latest is there is a deadline of the 25th, this Saturday, to address these comments. There are 14 outstanding items that have been engineering items that have been identified that the developer must address this week before the city can proceed with enforcement. And this has been an ongoing issue that I've been kind of keeping both P&Z and city council updated on. But technically we have a deadline fast approaching this Friday where then we're obligated to conduct further enforcement. In terms of code amendments, so this is the other update so I won't go into detail on this right now. So that's the other agenda item. In terms of legislative updates, there was a House bill that was passed, House Bill 1007 of this year, by the state legislature. Essentially, it will require the city to update its zoning code definition of family to be fully compliant. Our definition of family in our zoning code is pretty good right now. In terms of it's permissive. It doesn't necessarily have a limit for the number of unrelated individuals, and I would say nationwide and obviously statewide with this bill, there's a trend towards to removing these limits to comply to require families occupying single family dwellings or dwellings in general to have like a blood relationship with each other to be considered a family. And so different cities, communities have different definitions of family and particularly how many unrelated individuals can live in one household. So the state legislator says, okay, you cannot limit that occupancy based on blood relationship. So this our code doesn't do that, but there's one exemption that could potentially get us in trouble. So we're essentially removing that exemption. So we'll to comply with the state statute, we will run an ordinance later this summer. Technically, it's required by July 1st. There's no way that we have the staff capacity to get that done. But we're going to run through an ordinance through this fall, which will be an amendment to the zoning code, which will come in front of P&Z. And it's essentially a housekeeping item. So that will be coming in front of you later this year. In terms of the Lake County referral letter for the Silver King project, the change of use, PUD, et cetera. Just my quick update on that is there was a public hearing on that at Lake County Planning Commission. That application was continued. There was a lot of discussion just around the definitions and terms and conditions for the affordable housing limitations. It's my understanding that the applicant is being responsive to the Planning Commission's the items that the Planning Commission communicated at that meeting, and they will be coming back for another hearing. And I believe that's scheduled for the 28th, but don't quote me on that.
Yep, that's Commissioner Law. Yeah, that's correct. It's on the 28th.
Okay. Good news on the housing front. So the development subcommittee of the Regional Housing Authority has been reviewing the request for proposals for the which I think we're expecting to be out about 28 units on the 2 infill affordable housing sites. 3 finalists have been selected to prepare their final response to come to the BOCC on the 31st. Those 3 finalists do include the finalist does include Fading West, the modular housing manufacturer down valley from us. And so I'm just actively involved in all those meetings and feeling really good about the progress with this project. So that is definitely moving along. So stay tuned for that. And I want to just provide a quick update on the 2025 comprehensive plan. So the county has started a conversation with Community Builders, which is essentially a planning nonprofit that they conducted a workshop with, and the county has kind of started this conversation with the intent of doing some kind of, I think, strategic visioning and kind of more like long range planning leading up to a comprehensive plan update and adoption in 2025. And that's how the county originally started that. And that conversation, kind of at staff level between the 2 planning departments and Community Builders, I've been participating in this meeting, has really shifted towards potential opportunity for both Lake County and the city to work with Community Builders on not just Lake County's kind of like strategic visioning and long range planning efforts, but on a combined comprehensive plan. And there are more meetings to be had on this in the coming weeks. We've had 2 meetings so far, but I think that how this could go is that Community Builders, this nonprofit planning group, could assist both the city and Lake County with a funding effort and bringing in funds to really have a really solid 2025 comprehensive planning process. And so I'm actually pretty excited about that, and I've been glad to be participating in those meetings. And so I'll continue to bring back more information to the P&Z, but obviously this will be you know, as this conversation progresses, this will be a huge item to loop in the P and Z on, and for your participation. But that's the only update I have so far on that.
Chapin, this is Greg.
Yes.
That the timing is pretty good. It's going to be the 10-year mark.
Yep.
Even though it's a 5-year requirement. No, I don't think anybody pays attention to that. But I think 10 years is a good time frame to revisit the comprehensive plan. So this seems like right on time.
And I agree, and I think that in terms of, you know, their comprehensive plans, you know, kind of these days probably start at, you know, around $100,000 and go up if you're hiring a consulting firm to take your comprehensive plan, you know, update, or a new comprehensive plan from start to finish, and that, you know, that number can certainly go north of there. But you know, you're just not going to get a firm to do a comprehensive plan effort for, you know, for $20,000. You know, a private consulting firm. So I think the good thing about what I'm learning about community builders is this is a nonprofit group that can really help source funding opportunities from philanthropic efforts, from state grants, et cetera, to really build a funding pathway, a funding package. And I think our partnership with the county on this, it brings in some more unique opportunities to leverage funds. So, for example, if the city you know, doesn't have the revenue to budget for comprehensive planning in 2024, our partnership on this could mean that there's other funding streams could help with comprehensive planning efforts in this year, and the city's commitment to this could mean that our funding is more on the back end. We would need to have some skin in the game, but obviously we're leveraging funds. We're not paying for the whole thing potentially, and our contribution could be, we could kick that can down the road a bit. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and yeah, I'm excited to update the P and Z as this conversation progresses.
The funding in 2015, if I remember correctly, was through DOLA, and they do fund comp plans. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, I think DOLA would be really excited to see Lake County and Leadville working together on a comprehensive plan update. That is the city council updates that I have. Thank you.
All right, moving on to new business, which states none, which is great. Then continuing business.
All right, so last night at city council, I gave a presentation on the 2 ordinances that we have been working together on. You know, one for a long time, the housing variety, and one for relatively short time, the development agreements. I have this, I did not include the slide deck that I presented at city council last night. In your packet, I included the same material that was in the packet, which is essentially the kind of the long, boring technical text in the memo, et cetera. So I will do just a quick verbal update on kind of what happened last night, and then just say that I'm happy to click through the slide deck so you can just kind of see exactly what city council saw with all the pretty pictures, et cetera. But the main key update is that last night the city council gave a presentation, a 10-minute plus presentation, so that the city council didn't have to come for a special work session on kind of the status of these 2 ordinances, everything that the P and Z has recommended to date, where we're at, everything we worked on in our last work sessions, and laid out a schedule for ordinance adoption for this summer for the public hearings, and explained the concepts, the latest updates for what has changed since the council last saw these two code packages, and asked the city council if they had any concerns, and if they were supportive of moving forward with this. I did present to city council, and let me back up just 1 second. Since we last met a couple weeks ago on development agreements at Planning and Zoning Commission, I went to city attorney and communicated the concerns that Planning and Zoning Commission had with the parameters, the limitations within the development agreement ordinance. We discussed about that. So the limitations for both public benefits and for waivers. communicated that, you know, the Planning and Zoning Commission, found that if we were going to have a development agreement ordinance and it was going to provide, the intent of that was to provide some flexibility for unanticipated projects, unanticipated public benefits, that it should be more flexible, if not fully flexible. And that that Planning and Zoning Commission was supportive of the concept of development agreements, but was not supportive of having those limitations. In other words, there should be more flexibility within that ordinance. City attorney said that's fine. Planning and Zoning Commission can have that recommendation. The city attorney's office will not support a development agreement ordinance that does not have those limitations. So in other words, they felt that would be exposing the city to risk, litigation, et cetera, and put the city council in a potentially like arbitrary situation. And so they said, so, you know, originally when Chapin came to city attorney and said last fall and said we should have a development agreement, we should consider a development agreement ordinance, the city attorney's office was skeptical, but staff kind of, and through working with the city attorney, got the city attorney to the point where they were comfortable with having a development agreement ordinance as long as it included those parameters. But they said, but then if we were to remove those parameters, then the city attorney was essentially going to be going backwards in terms of their support. Now, you know, the city attorney acknowledged that, you know, two things. One, the city attorney is there to provide advice. The city council makes these decisions. And obviously we want to have the Planning and Zoning Commission's consideration, you know, and ideally recommendation, aligning with city council. But again, the city attorney is just making advice. The city council makes the decision. They should consider the city attorney's advice. And then the other was that, you know, this is city council decision. It's not staff's decision, not city attorney's decision, not Planning and Zoning Commission's decision. So I, you know, briefly presented that kind of position of all parties to the city council last night. And I said that, Planning and Zoning Commission's considerations should be considered. I said, you know, staff would like to see this ordinance move forward. So I think in the interest of time, staff is aligning with the city attorney to let's get this ordinance passed. It is, I clarify that it is including the benefits, or I guess you should say the waivers, like building height increase and density limitations, that in the planning office, day-to-day operations, we're answering phone calls and people are saying, hey, I want to voluntarily build some deed restricted housing, but here are my issues. These are the issues that I'm most regularly seeing. And so that's why I'm recommending that those be the limitations that we start off with. But I said that we should consider what Planning and Zoning Commission's concerns are, and that I'll align with the city attorney for now to get this moving forward. But if this does not work the way that it is intended, and we can't anticipate exactly what the market will do in terms of housing, but if this does not work the way that it is intended in terms of essentially incentivizing developers to come in, build community housing, and maybe take advantage of some of these code waivers that they might need in order to make the project pencil and kind of get the economies of scale and the density that they need. If that doesn't work, then we should come back and we should consider the Planning and Zoning Commission's concerns and essentially recommendations to broaden this so that it can be more effective at accomplishing what we want. So just want to be very straightforward. That is what I communicated, that P&Z was not recommending as proposed. The staff was aligning with the city attorney for getting this accomplished, but the staff also recognized that we may need to come back and revise this ordinance if it, in the short term, we're not seeing the intended effects. Questions on that?
This is Greg. I would say, sorry, I'm eating dinner too. I would say that I appreciate where you're going with this. I happen to think the city attorney is being too strident, but I'm not falling on my sword over that either. I agree with you that getting something done is important. My issue has been that if you put parameters in there, it's like an invitation to accept those parameters when you put numbers in place. So, and it's limiting. it actually is a double-edged sword. So, and neither are good. But I would say that I support your stance on this.
You know, what lies in front of us is, you know, is now the formal public hearing process will begin. And so everything that we have done so far is technically not even required. You know, so, but it's what we should do, and it's why these things kind of take a long time to try and get it as close as possible to being right. But what lies in front of us in terms of the public hearing process is still an opportunity for discussions to be had, things to be communicated, et cetera. So as we are, you know, as we're continuing through the public hearing process, I don't know what kind of public comments that we will receive, but I definitely want to just continue to communicate the Planning and Zoning Commission's review, considerations, concerns, et cetera, to all, including City Council. So let's make sure that keeps on happening as there'll be a memo, a staff report from your recommendation at the public hearing that's coming up that will go to City Council, and I'm going to include all of the P and Z's comments that they haven't had an opportunity to, you know, for example, to see in writing so far.
Hey, Chapin, this is Scott.
Yes.
I guess my question was, in terms of, I know we kicked it back to the city attorney, and in terms of potential exposure with this, were there any way, was there any recommendation on how to better navigate this process perhaps, or is it like an all or none, or I'm just kind of wondering, like, usually legal counsel has some advice on how to pursue train of thought without some of the caveats.
Yeah, I mean, so just to clarify, the city attorney's office is perfectly comfortable with the way it is proposed right now. So they're not concerned with any kind of exposure for litigation, et cetera. With as it is proposed, they stand behind it as proposed. But that was really that they're only there because of the how it is written, the limitations that are in there, so that they were, in other words, they were not okay with giving City Council full discretion to waive any code requirement. Now, yes, there could be opportunity to, you know, if we were to make it more flexible, so it's, in other words, the code waivers are not just limited to building height and density and vested property rights, that we could make it more flexible, but provide more clarification at the same time. So for example, City Council can't authorize waivers to building code, you know, so that there's not a kind of like structural safety concerns for things like that. So, you know, we can clarify that even if we were to make it more flexible and open it up, we can still clarify the limitations that, you know, this is limited to Title 17 zoning. It's not even available to Title 16 subdivision in terms of property lines and easements and all those things. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I want a little additional insight on what council was thinking, but no, that definitely helps.
Okay, and to be straightforward, I think that this group has by all means further evaluated this than City Council has. City Council has essentially had a work session on this where we just reviewed the bullet points before it even went in. The city attorney even drafted the ordinance. P&Z saw it next after the city attorney had drafted the ordinance. And then City Council saw it last night in a 10-minute presentation, you know, where they had some materials included in their packet that, you know, I can't assume that everyone had the time to read everything there. So I think that city councils, of course, I mean, they had the opportunity to review it in their packet. They saw like a slide deck that was, you know, more interesting to read than the packet. And they've heard from me what P&Z and city attorney and staff, what our positions are on this. So they are informed, but they're probably leaning heavily on what staff, city attorney and P&Z considerations are.
Right. Emmy, you had a question?
Yeah, let's see. Sorry, I'm sick. So if I start coughing, apologies in advance. I think I also understand the move to just get something in place instead of nothing in place. So I support that ethos. But I would request that assuming city council passes it the way it's written, that you as staff figure out some kind of mechanism to like once a year or twice a year, kind of like collect all of the development agreements that you have worked on and somehow synthesize with us like what has been working and what hasn't been working so that we can actually keep this like on the back burner, but something we can dig into every once in a while and stay up on to make further suggestions for an amendment, because I just think our opinion is valuable and we are really digging into it. And it, you know, like once we actually have material to, or examples that have really come across your plate to dig into, it might be clarifying. And I just don't want to miss an opportunity, especially now that you're finally going to be fully or more staffed. I don't know what fully staffed means, but that's a request I think I would want to make. And part of that is I can't remember in this moment what the proposed workflow would be. Like if you have a development agreement that's getting passed through the system, at what point would P&Z see it, comment on it, or deal with it at all? Or would we kind of be really hands off? And so maybe along the way we would be experiencing like the details of what these things are. But if we're not, then I think the request to have you pull together some kind of report and overview so that we can dig into it would make sense. So hopefully that makes sense what I just said.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would definitely, I definitely feel comfortable committing to both of those. You know, I think I've communicated to P&Z that I worked in a jurisdiction previously that had using development agreements for a while. I would say on average, even in that kind of like, you know, very intense, like development intense, real estate market, I think, you know, maybe averaging 2 to 4 development agreements per year. And most of those related to some kind of, affordable housing. So, you know, so they are somewhat limited, but you know, in terms of how many that come through, so it should be pretty easy to go back and analyze them. And we can extend that to not just the ones that got fully approved, but even just the ones that were being discussed and that may have gone away because something didn't work for some reason. That's probably actually the ones that are more important to come back and discuss at P&Z. So, yeah, I can definitely try to make a point to track that, and, you know, bring back some, you know, some analytics, some data so that we can consider that in the next year.
Yeah, like I don't know when it makes sense to do this, but it could be one of those things that we add to the very bottom of the goal setting list, which is just like
Yeah.
review development agreements from the last calendar year or something. I know how few they are, or at least anecdotally from what you've said, I recognize that it won't be many, but so maybe once a year is enough. And I just think it's a really good way to, like, we have to have it written down somewhere so that we will do it. And I just think it's a really good muscle that we should keep active and not just forget about it completely. Because with a comp plan coming, it would be very easy to forget. So
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Mayor Green.
Yeah, I think I mean, I can lend perhaps a little bit of insight into at least what city council was thinking, or at least the questions that we were asking from this presentation on the development agreements. And so one of the things that we asked was, you know, in Chapin's experience, you know, what are the most common requests for a development that needs that would like exceed our code. And in his experience, I'm gonna just tell me if I'm wrong, Chapin, but primarily it was max height and sometimes density, which are the two that are in the current draft of the ordinance. My question to you guys, and particularly those of you with building or development experiences, have you encountered other types of flexibilities that you wish or were available or had heard that somebody was asking for, because I understand, that there's a feeling that we shouldn't have these guardrails, but I'm wondering, what other hypotheticals exist outside of these two common ones of height and density in your all's experience?
I don't have any experience with that.
I would say one of the conversations in the PUD for the rail yards was setbacks. And of course, when you do a PUD, then those zoning parameters are open, to negotiation. But we did change setback requirements in the rail yards in certain sectors. And so I was a little surprised when Chapin said setbacks will be off the table.
Well, one of the things that we also learned, and to be frank, I don't know what the setbacks are in the rail yard, but that our general code is really pretty, I won't use the word lax, generous in setbacks as they exist currently.
Well, how do you mean? I'm not sure I understand that, because the code says 10-foot
I'm-
setbacks in residential, whereas our history has been 0 setbacks. So,
10 from the front.
right.
Side is like I can reach out and practically touch your house.
Yeah, that's true. No, I think there's a someplace in between that makes a lot of sense. But so for instance, we have 3-foot setbacks on the side for each house. That means there's 6 feet between between houses, which we know historically has not been the norm. But I've had some contractors tell me that the 3-foot setbacks for each house is really problematic for them, because the setback is from the very eave, not from the side of the building. And so that causes a whole different set of problems for builders and the space they have to work in. So those are just thoughts.
Hey, this is Scott. Along those lines with setbacks, like I have a 7-inch setback along my east side of my property. And in terms of negotiating, that amount of space is highly problematic as well, especially with snow load and discharge off the roof line. So, I think one needs to be really careful about like giving away like the setback. I mean, there's a lot of building considerations that come into effect with our climate, including rain. Like last July when we had that significant rain event, not having proper setbacks were a huge issue for new development as well as old, historical structures now as well. And anyhow, I think it should be, we should be pretty careful about that.
Morgan, I see your hand up. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, along the lines of the setbacks too, there are building codes that require, it just gets a lot more expensive if it's only 3 feet, because then you actually have to put a fire rating on the entire wall, and it limits the amount of windows you can have. And anything even between the 3 to 5 foot, you're dealing with like the overhang has to be rated, and you potentially can't do a vented roof. But then once you get to 5 feet and beyond, and that's from the edge of foundation, then it gets substantially easier and cheaper to build. So for what it's worth.
And so I'm gathering from this discussion that we wouldn't necessarily say want to add an additional or consider an additional thing on the development agreement saying that we're, we'll haggle about particularly side setbacks, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think the theme that we're kind of talking about here is that there's kind of a dividing line between these dimensional standards. In terms of the dimensional standards, we can kind of put into one category that they kind of affect like affect the intensity of the use of the property, which can have impacts. But is as long as the property can be used for that intensity and function. In other words, if you can fit the density on the site, if you can fit the height on the site, and you can still meet the parking requirements, et cetera, and the site can function, then we can kind of put those into one category. And then the others are things that are really, we should be careful about addressing or about waiving, because they can really affect site function and like have like big impacts to adjacent property owners, like Scott was mentioning. If we can go into the setbacks and the snow is then shedding onto a neighbor's property, that's like a direct physical impact. If we have, if we require 75%, one of the other standards is we require, 65% or 75% maximum lot coverage with buildings. If we waive that and we allow someone to have 100% coverage of their building, of their site, for example, with buildings, then there's no opportunity for that water to infiltrate into the ground before it leaves the site. There's no opportunity for the snow to melt, or to shed anywhere without going on adjacent property. So again, like a direct physical impact onto a neighboring property. So those are the kind of the theme that we're talking about here, is separating these different standards into two different properties or two different categories. Part of the development agreement process is the applicant coming to the city council with a site plan that works, so that it functions. We can see that everything fits on the site. So even though you're getting these code waivers, show that this site still works and it still functions. And this is where the city attorney and I kind of differed on this. I think that the Planning and Zoning Commission kind of does play an important role in determining whether or not a project with code waivers fits on a site and can function, like I was just describing. Before it goes through a development agreement process. And so I was actually a proponent of having the Planning and Zoning Commission be a review with a recommendation prior to city council. City council or the city attorney kind of heard that, but approached that in a different way and said, yes, Planning and Zoning Commission should see that, but I don't want city council or Planning and Zoning Commission to be a part of this legislative process for a site specific ordinance. So they said, rather, let's require the development agreement to be submitted concurrently with a site plan that would go through the review process at Planning and Zoning Commission. So the Planning and Zoning Commission is not necessarily making a recommendation on the ordinance, but they're making a development agreement on, a recommendation on the site plan that's associated with the development agreement. That was with the point of saying that we need to make sure that even with these waivers, that the site functions, that these exceptions that we're allowing still allows the project to fit and function on the site.
And this is kind of, I think that's definitely the key point to all this, it's would help alleviate, I think, a lot of the concerns regarding waivers.
I'm happy to click through the slide deck. Does anybody feel the need to see that? Would they like to see what city council saw, or are we happy to do whatever?
I did have one other comment. I don't know if I need to see the slide deck right now, but did you guys was there any discussion about, single family projects versus multifamily or mixed use development? Because it seems like the standards you're talking about, increased lot coverage and reduced setbacks and increased height, those seem like kind of prescriptive based things that could be beneficial to someone when building a single family that's deed restricted. But it seems like you just need more artistic license with bigger developments.
So the discussion at city council last night didn't really talk about this applying to how this would relate to single family development. And I think we definitely when the city council was answering questions, I definitely responded with, a lot of times that we're expecting that when people are coming in, they're trying to get, they're voluntarily proposing, deed restricted housing. They are going to need to make it pencil, so they have to have economies of scale. They need to have density, and so this is most like, where you're at, in single family development, we're not worried about the density calculation, right? So they're not needing more units of density because by nature it's just one unit. So we can't expect that with multifamily. So that is one of the reasons this ordinance targets multifamily, multi-unit development, which could be a triplex, but multi-unit development. But the height waiver supposedly, that could allow for single family development in theory. I just think that's highly unlikely. So I'm not expecting any code waivers for single family development for height.
I would say, just personally, I would have a real hard time agreeing to a height waiver on a family or residential unit. We've been through that with the hotel that was proposed for the rail yards, and we did a height waiver for them, based on their plan that we found pretty appealing. But for residential, I think it really wrecks a neighborhood.
I would agree.
Maybe the situation where that could happen is where if someone wanted to do an accessory dwelling unit and the accessory dwelling unit height was it was on the same lot as a single family house and it was going to exceed the height for some reason. And we wanted to get that accessory dwelling unit to be deed restricted, but in order for the project to be built, it would have to exceed the height for some reason. So that might be just an example of how that could potentially apply on single family. I think that's not what this is targeted at, but I guess that could happen.
Or you're thinking exceeding the height of the primary residence rather than exceeding the 35 feet?
Well, the maximum height would just apply to the entire property, whether it was a single family or ADU. So I was just thinking that might be that's the only situation I can think of where this development agreement waiver for building height could be used on a single family property in a situation where they're we're trying to have to get a public benefit from the property, right? So what kind of public benefit can we get from a single family house? Well, the code doesn't require them to do a deed restricted ADU. They can just do an ADU, but it's not required to be deed restricted. So maybe they want to build their the ADU over the garage, but they want it to be but it's going to exceed the height limitation. So we can allow them to do that so they can have their ADU, but in exchange we can say that ADU has to be deed restricted.
So many variables,
Right.
endless. It's hard to anticipate everything, obviously. So I think overall, I have a pretty positive feeling about all this. So at least that's where I'm at.
Maybe that single family are billionaires and would exchange a max height for building us a pool.
Love it.
That would technically be within the three. It would be public infrastructure that serves a public purpose for a public benefit.
Love it. Anybody else? Any other thoughts, comments, insight?
Hi, I just joined. Can you just give me a sense of where you are on the agenda?
We're number 5, continued business update on the council presentation last night for the two ordinances.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, we're about ready to wrap it up, Abby.
Oh, great. I just joined. Sorry, I'm in the town of Nederland and we had a discussion on their 3-mile plan tonight. So very
Well,
interesting. They have some similar issues and some very, very different issues.
Hey, Gabby, I'm
Yes.
just kidding, but Chapin, where do you want to go from here?
I could just quickly summarize for Gabby. So Gabby, where we're at is I was just updating the P and Z that last night I gave a presentation to city council, so they didn't have to come to a work session on where we're at with the two ordinances. And before we proceed to the public hearing schedule for this summer, which would start with P and Z, making sure that they were comfortable with these latest changes and these updates. We talked about how I communicated P and Z's recommendation not to include the limitations. And we had a discussion on that, but the city council ultimately was supportive of moving forward with these ordinances to public hearings, but including the limitations within the development agreement ordinance. And the only thing a question I'd posed to the group just as you jumped on, because I think otherwise we could start wrapping up, is I had a slide deck that I presented to council that's different than in your packet, and I'm happy to just like quickly click through that if the P and Z would like for me to do that.
Not for me.
Okay.
Greg, are you in Chapin's office? I don't see your face.
That's because I was eating dinner and I didn't want to be impolite, but no, I'm not in Chapin's office.
Oh, okay. I don't even see a square. Maybe I have the thing hidden where if like you're not showing video, you're not on the
You've rubbed me out.
yeah. Interesting.
Hey, this is Scott. I'm going to circle back to M's recommendation real quick and put it at the bottom of the goal setting, just so
Yeah.
that I lose track of it. And that was just the follow-up of over the course of a year's, or like biannually or something like that, of recap of the development agreement and types of projects that have happened over the course of that time.
Yeah, we'll do that.
And then,
Can I ask a question about something in general updates, even though we already moved past it?
yes.
Thing I was most curious about that I was sad I missed is what I'm really curious to hear about doing the plan with community builders. Did we get a grant? Are they doing it kind of nonprofit pro bono? What's the story there?
So I guess the quick summary on that is that so this, and I don't pretend to understand like this the whole background of this group and their structure, but it's my understanding Community Builders is a well-known nonprofit that works in the planning sector, consulting and working on long-range planning and comprehensive planning. And this group, they've performed comprehensive plans or quasi-comprehensive planning recently for Crested Butte. I guess that was actually sorry, what's the county that Crested Butte is in?
Gunnison?
And yeah, Gunnison County, thank you. And for the town of Silverton. And they conducted a workshop with Lake County recently, and that workshop was with the county's initial request to do some kind of visioning and strategic and long-range planning prior to entering into comprehensive planning in 2025. And I think that was, and some of you will understand this better than I will because you were here in the community before I was, just coming out of the comprehensive planning from 2015, just some fatigue and in terms of not feeling like 100% great after that got adopted. And so I think the county was communicating that we'd like to not have that same feeling coming out of the 2025 comp plan. And so that they were trying to do some community building, not to use this group's name, but community building prior to the comprehensive plan in 2025 to make sure that the 2020 comprehensive plan was done really well, and everybody felt really good about it afterwards. In terms of public input, the whole 9 yards, et cetera. So the county reached out to me and said, hey, we're doing this, and, you know, asked if I could be involved. And so they included me in the second meeting a couple weeks ago. And, I basically asked, is there an opportunity for the city, to partner with the county in this community planning effort? And, since they said, yeah, well, let's look into that. And that group essentially came back and said, it makes a lot of sense for the city and the county to partner together, in this planning effort. And we would actually be supportive of this being a comprehensive planning effort, not just a long range strategic visioning, long range planning effort prior to the comp plan. So we had a meeting today, and I think you know, there's a lot of discussion. I think there's more pros than cons in terms of the city participating in this effort. And one of the ones that I mentioned to P&Z was a financial benefit. So there's opportunity for the city to leverage funds and to spend our limited funds wisely, and have more flexibility in when we spend our funds on comprehensive planning, by partnering with the county, using this potentially using this nonprofit, and developing a funding stream to support what would otherwise be a, you know, $100,000 plus comprehensive planning effort if we went with a private consulting firm. So just in the discussion point, but that's the best update.
Great. Well, I really respect the work that they do. So I am annoyed sometimes that they're a nonprofit and they compete for the same exact work and probably charge half the price for it. But they do great work. So it's very exciting.
And I think the city took action on that. You know, if we were to take action on that, it would be later this year. And certainly part of the conversation would be, you know, pros and cons of using, you know, nonprofit groups, et cetera, versus consulting firms, and the dollars and cents that go into that.
Back to you, Scott. You're running the show.
All right, then, just want to make sure nothing else is happening here, but just moving on to public comment items not on the agenda. Do we have anybody?
And we have one member of the public in attendance in my office. Steve, do you have any comments? Okay, no comments.
None at this time, and then I guess I'd like to adjourn the meeting.
Can we just talk quickly about next meetings?
Yes, of course.
So down here at the very bottom of your agenda, I just want to note that we have 2 public hearings coming up at our next meetings. So we will need to kind of transition back to a hybrid format for our next 2 meetings. So June 12th, so we're going to skip a couple weeks. Today's the 22nd, and then we won't meet again for the 12th. So that gives us about 1, 2, 3 weeks until we meet again. And then, so that will be a public hearing for the freight boxcars conditional use permit. And then following that, will be the public hearings for the 2 ordinances that we discussed tonight. So both of those will be in hybrid. Obviously these things go a bit easier if we have P&Z members attending in public sometimes, in person sometimes, although just want to maintain the hybrid format and give everybody the option for whatever works best for them.
Sounds great.
I don't want to be the only person in the room for these these public hearings though, so don't do that to me.
I'll be there.
All right.
I can
Thanks.
definitely make the 12th. The 26th is a maybe,
Okay, thank you.
but I'll attend hybrid if I can't make it in person.
Thanks.
Sounds great. All right, then. How about we adjourn the meeting now? We need a second.
I think you can just adjourn it. I don't think you need a
Okay, then. All
motion.
right, then. Hey,
Good meeting.
unless there's any other comments, let's adjourn it. Move on to dinner. Fair enough.
No, we already had dinner. You didn't know?
Awful lucky there, Greg.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everybody.
All right, thanks, Scott, for running the meeting. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye now.
guys. Good night.
Bye.